Welcome back to the JB Sports Podcast. Today is Friday, January 16th, and we are back for another pod. Anybody that's been listening for a while, you probably are clocking that I'm not the person that usually does the intros on the podcast when we're going at full strength, but unfortunately, my brother / co-host could not be here today for whatever reason, and hopefully we'll have him back next week and we'll get him back in, but until then, the pod still has to go on. So here I am. I'll be sitting here talking with you guys about all the things I want to talk about when it comes to college football and NFL and all of that. I think there might be an NBA thing I might decide to want to talk about, but honestly, I don't care enough yet. Here's the thing with the NBA is that I watch NBA. I bet on some NBA games casually, nothing crazy. I'm a fan of an NBA team, but obviously with my fandom being attached to the Bulls, there isn't much to watch. They are a young team, but not necessarily a team that really can do anything long term. So it is very easy to kind of fall in and out of, I'm not going to say love, but having my attention. So basketball, especially once football season is over, I will have to dive back into NBA a little bit more, especially since we have a podcast. We'll have to talk about something here on the pod. So I'll have to do that at some point. But as of right now, there's still way too much football going on to talk about for me to have to really worry about basketball in order to have at least a what is the word I'm looking for? A semi-good podcast putting out every week, especially with it being 2 times a week during football season. So without further ado, I was talking about basketball. Jace, hopefully he'll be back next week so we can do the pod together. But other than that, you're going to hear me sitting here talking about both college football because we have the national championship game that's happening. It's not coming out. National championship game coming out on Monday. And we're not going to pod again until probably Tuesday. So I will want to do our picks on that game and kind of give my initial thoughts of how I think that game will go. And then as well as that, you have the NFL picks for the divisional round of games coming up over the next couple days that I want to talk about as well. Give my thoughts on that. The NFL coaching hires that have happened so far, only been one, but I think it's a pretty big one that has happened as of right now. So I do want to talk about that. And that's pretty much it. So there's really not a lot to talk about. So I think relative to what our podcasts usually are, I think it'll be a shorter pod. I can't guarantee anything, but I'm just based off what I have to talk about and the amount and the density of, not the density, but the amount of things I have to talk about today, I think it shouldn't be that bad, but I can't guarantee anything. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to what we're here to talk about, and that's talking about sports here. So we will start with college football, and before I get to the game, I have I'll have a couple overarching things that I want to give a thought on real quick before I get to the actual game, because again, there's not that much college football to really talk about right now. If you're not going to talk about all the madness happening in the portal and all those other things happening. But I really don't want to dive into the portal too much because I feel like I've done a lot of complaining about the portal and all of that recently on the last few pods. So I don't necessarily want to go really deep in that rabbit hole. I do have one thought I think that could help the portal be a little bit better. Just from being a guy following it for my team, Ohio State, and all of that, and then following all the bigger names that are going from school to school, just trying to get a bigger paycheck, or not because of money, because of playing time. Who knows what the reasons are? But I do have one thought on that. But before I get to that, before I get to the game, I do have a couple of those things to talk about. So I have one thought on the portal, and I know I said I wasn't going to start with that, but I am. One thought on the portal, and I think it could make the portal a lot better until we get some real rules when it comes to the money and all these other things to kind of get some type of, I'm not saying to try to inhibit these kids from being able to move if they want to move, but I think there should be some guardrails in the way to make kids have to really think about it. Not only the kids with the schools that are pretty much saying, hey, we're willing to pay you such and such amount of money if you want to come here and leave the school that you're at. I just feel like if there was just one guardrail in the way, I feel like could help a lot when it comes to just making people think about it from the get-go, right? So thinking about what is that guy's name? Damon Williams, I think. Damon Williams Jr., the quarterback from Washington, right? And I know I've talked about this on pod before about him signing a contract to stay with Washington, getting a big old boost when it comes to the money he's getting from NIL. and then a week or two later, announce within like a week or so, announcing that he was going to go into the portal and potentially transfer away from Washington. And what Washington did with that was like, hey, they didn't say, hey, go on your merry way, we're willing to let you leave. They said, no, you signed a contract to stay with us, and we signed a contract to pay you this amount of money for NIL. And because of that, there are buyouts in place that say that, like, you're not allowed to leave because you've already signed this thing. And I think, and then now, since then, he has decided to go back. And then the same thing with more recently, there's a pair of Florida State twins that went to Florida State. I think they're both defensive ends. I don't remember their name off the top of my head, but they also decided, hey, we're going to try to get into the transfer portal. They never actually announced it because there was a caveat in their NIL contracts that said is that if they were to try to transfer after signing for the money that they got, that there would be kind of like a buyout. Either the school would have to pay, the school that is getting them out of Florida State would have to pay, or the kids would have to pay themselves in order to break the contract and then leave to go to a different school. And because of that, it was never figured out. And whatever, because I think Ohio State was one of the teams that was talking to them about it. And for whatever reason, they couldn't figure it out when it comes to whether like getting the money, the buyout, and how much money that is, and like being okay with that, or finding a way to get around it. And all in all, it ended up being that those twins are actually going to stay at Florida State and play for another year. And I think when I was thinking about it, that may be a perfect, not perfect, because there's always going to be bad downsides to everything, and there's no such thing as perfect in this world, right? But I think as close, like within the current structure that we have in college football, where there is no collective bargaining, there is no, again, I guess if you're going to make a rule like that, there's going to have be collective bargaining. I'm not going to lie about that. That might make things a little bit weird about that. But I'm just going to talk about this as an idea. I just think that if you were to have all schools and their collectives, when they sign these kids to these contracts and then get them these big NIL deals that they're looking forward to where if everybody just decided, hey, if we're just going to sit here and have buyout clauses in these contracts to make it harder, not harder, but make it to where it's more cost prohibitive to leave, I think that'll lead to a lot more kids in schools not making the moves they're making as of right now, where things in the transfer portal are kind of going insane, where schools are contacting kids and saying, hey, we're willing to pay you more if you're willing to come here, or kids going to their schools and trying to strong arm them and say, hey, if you don't guarantee me a starting spot or want to give me more money, I'm going to go ahead and leave and go to somewhere else. I just feel like if you have a buyout clause in all these kids' contracts, I just feel like it'll just add another roadblock in the way that'll eventually lead to some of these kids not making the hasty decision of just trying to leave for a bigger bag, or for these schools that are just like without any type of penalty, just telling these kids, getting in hold with them with their agents saying, hey, if your athlete or if you want to come to our school, we're just going to give you a bigger paycheck and not have to pay any sort of penalty for that. And I just feel like if you add a buyout clause in all these contracts in general, which I think you can do without it being necessarily having to be collectively bargained, I just think that overall it might lead just a more healthy sport, at least when it comes to the transfer portal and NIL deals and everything. Because the way I look at it is that it just adds a little bit, because if those teams would have to pay a buyout, or if the kids are going to have to pay back some money towards that school in order to go where they want to go and make that hasty decision, I think it'll just make everybody in the scenario have to think about it just a little bit harder as to whether it's worth it. Because again, once they start taking money out of people's pockets, people start making some different decisions. And I do think if you do that towards all of college football, and I guess basketball too, I think it's kind of a similar deal, even though it's not as wide ranging as football is, where heck, in the football transfer portal right now for just FBS, it's like over 3,000, 3,500 kids in the portal right now. And the portal closes, I think, tonight. And heck, think about it this way. The portal closes tonight, and then those players are still in there. They still have a chance to go to different schools if another school wants them to go there. But if they don't, now they have to go back to their current schools and like try to apologize and say that, hey, will you take me back? And I think it just leads to a lot more toxic of situations when you have something like this happen. And I just think this having the buyout in there will just make everybody have to take a beat and be like, hey, if you really want to make this decision, you're either going to have to pay a lot of money to make it happen and make them be able to get out of break their contracts in order to come to you. And I feel like that just that I think will help a lot of these situations, because I just think a lot of these are, I don't want to blame the kids, right? And I'm going to say kids because I do think they are playing a grown man's game when it comes to NIL and money and all of that. And I do think some of them are getting probably taken advantage of by the people around them or their agents that they have in there, because every time these deals come up, these agents, because there's no cap on what they can make on these deals like there is when it comes to like representation for the NFL and NBA, like there's a cap on how much those people can make on the contracts of players. But in college football, in NIL right now, when it comes to these marketing deals, there is no such rule. So these people that are representing these kids, they get to make who knows how much money based off of what these kids end up getting when it comes to their NIL deals. So I just think as long as there's these rules aren't figured out, I just feel like adding these buyouts will, I just think, will lead to having a little bit more, just take a beat to think about it before you want to make a hasty decision, because it's going to cost somebody some major money in order to make it happen. And I think that goes on the schools too that want to like try to get these players to go from one school to their school, is because, hey, if you're Oregon and you want to get a kid from Ohio State to come to your school, you're going to have to pay Ohio State a decent amount of change in order to get them out of their contract they're with Ohio State to come to you. I feel like either you or the kid, and I think the kids will not be nearly as accepting of paying those buyout clauses in order to leave their situations. So I think they'll want to put that more on the schools that are trying to get them. And it's going to make everybody have to take a second and be like, hey, do we really want to, is this really worth it? Is just saying we'll pay you more just to hurt another school worth it? Or are you really making a real contract offer and you're making a real play at a kid saying like, hey, you really need them to come play for your school? Because I do think there is a little bit of pettiness in this whole scenario where they're just willing to sit there and say, hey, I'm willing to burn another 150, 200, like $500,000 on a kid just to make sure he can't play for that school. Because I do think when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to college football, that it is very, it's very competitive in that way and very petty in that way. So I just think that adding a buyout clause when it comes to just NIL deals in general, I think will lead to a lot more healthy of a system, at least for now, until there's some real rules put in place when it comes to collective bargaining and all that, when the NCAA gets their head out of their ass and like just get down to brass tacks and just say, we're going to have to really like let these kids have real representation and do collective bargaining in order to make it happen. Because I just think without that, you're never going to get the rules you need to in order for this sport to last long term. And I think you do need that. And again, it's not going to happen a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, but imagine this sport 20 years from now, if it keeps going at this rate, this sport will not be nearly as popular as it has built itself to be over the last 100 years, where college football has been such a dominant, and heck, the last 20, 30, 40 years where college football has really taken their next step into being pretty much the second most popular sport in the United States. It really is the second most popular sport to the NFL in the United States right now. So I just feel like you don't want to lose that. And I think part of those things that you're losing when everything's going as crazy as it is because it's going to be fan attention and buy-in. I mean, with all this happening, fans are really getting turned off by all of this stuff because it feels like everything's going haywire and there's no way to stop. It's like a running train, right? So I just think adding buyout clauses in general to all these NIL deals, I think will lead to a good change happening for all of college football and the kids that are playing in it. Because I do think they are getting played a little bit by the people around them and by the schools that are trying to get them. So I just think that would be a big help to everybody if that were to happen. And that's all I got on that. I don't want to go too much deeper into the NIL and all that space. Next thing I wanted to talk about was, let's see here. What was the other thing I wanted to get into for college football? No, that's pretty much it. That's the only big story I wanted to talk about for college football. Because everything else is all portal-based and Do I really want to go into the deep end on that? I probably don't. At some point, we'll get to like once all of the bigger names kind of go out of the, kind of leave the portal and get their new situations. Like maybe that's something to talk about after that's all over. Because again, like I said before, like just because a kid enters the portal doesn't mean that once the portal closes, they can't come out and go to a different school. It just means that no new people can, and no new players can enter the portal and expect themselves to be able to go to a different team. So once that's all kind of figured out and you have more of the names like more concrete as to where they're going, I think we'll have a more deeper discussion based off of what we think, how we think what schools got a lot better over this process and all of that. But I just want to make sure to have that because I just had that thought in my brain about it. I just think that buyouts would be such a huge help with all of this right now because it just feels like it's all very front facing. Like there is no deeper meaning. But I'm gonna say behind a lot of them because I think there are some real situations where players are looking for playing time and they're looking for opportunity. But I think there's way more chances of not chances, but way more situations where they're just players looking for the biggest bag they possibly get. And I don't think that's necessarily helpful for either them or their careers by just like chasing the next bag, whoever's going to willingly give it to them because it just doesn't always work that way. Just because they have the biggest money in their hand doesn't mean they're going to know what to do with you once you get there. And we all know 1 year can ruin a career. It really can if it's not done right and like if you're like kind of led towards the wrong direction. So I just think that would be a very big help in general. So getting out of that, I do have the when it comes to not transfer portal, but when it comes to eligibility rules, okay? Because I was reading a story talking about how there's a bunch, like it's like 5 Vandy players, Vanderbilt players that were denied their injunctions for a 5th year because they're all trying to look for an extra year of eligibility so they can stay in college, make some money. Because again, I think it's all pretty obvious is that not every single college football player that's playing in the Power 4, they're not all going to be NFL pros, right? I feel like it's a very easy thing to say, but sometimes it just needs to be said out loud. So not all these players are going to be NFL guys, and I just think that some of them are looking for their best way to try to maximize their value within the time frame that they have to make the money they can when they're in college football, where the money's kind of flowing a lot more in throughout when it comes to getting to all these players. And like heck, Trinidad Chambliss, the quarterback for Ole Miss, he was a fifth year college football player this year because I think he spent the first few years of his career at, why am I forgetting what school he was at before he went to Ole Miss this past year? Let's see. Where was he at before? He was at Ferris State for a couple years, the first couple years of his college career. So, and now he's made his way to Ole Miss where he's doing a lot better, making a lot of money, made some money this year because he was playing well. But imagine if he were to get another year of eligibility. I think he's in his 5th year now. So he's looking for a 6th year. And imagine if he could have one more year of being paid by Ole Miss to go out there and play football for him. He could be making a really good amount of money to help set himself up for the rest of his life if he's not going to be an NFL player, which again, more often than not, that's most players aren't going to be. And as talented as he is, he's a small guy and he really doesn't fit what the NFL really wants in quarterbacks as of right now. So I get him trying to take up any chance he can in order to up his chances of getting a real big chunk of change that'll help him out for the rest of his life. It's more of like a nest bed, right? To kind of set you up for the rest of your life. If you're getting a lot of this money, you're never really going to be able to make again if you're not playing football in college football. So I get that idea, right? You're trying to get as much money as you possibly can. But I think that because of these ages of these players in college football right now, because a lot of these players are getting extra years eligibility because of injuries, which is one thing. If you have catastrophic injuries, you should get an extra year of eligibility because that's not something you have control over. But when you start to have like 24, 25, 26-year-olds in college football playing against 18, 19-year-olds, I do think that does lead to a little bit of a gap that is not natural in what shouldn't be in college football. Like the average age, I think, of both Indiana and Miami is around like 22 and a half, 23 years old. And I feel like when you think about them and you think about some of these players that are a little bit older, 25 years old, I think there's a defensive end on Miami that is like Mesidor, I believe. He's 25 years old going against 18, 19, 20-year-olds on the offensive line. No wonder he's as dominant as he is. Because like when you're doing that much work on your body through such a prime time moment of your life, you're only going to get stronger. And being like there's a reason why grown man strength is a thing. And that's because as you grow and you kind of get to a point where you get to your peak physical condition, and then you start like you keep working out and you keep doing all this, like there's a strength that you kind of inherit that you don't have because you're just a little bit young and you're just like you're still growing into your own body in a way that's not happening for a 25-year-old. They've grown into their bodies, they've gotten the strength that they're going to have, and they're at their max spot when it comes to their growth and what they are going to be and all the working out they've done. Like I just feel like there's a little bit of a gap in between those players and some of the younger players that you're going against in college football. I do think that is a little bit of an issue, and that's kind of so the reasons for that. Like I said before, medical red shirts, I totally understand. When it comes to red shirts and like all that, when it comes to like players that don't play a full year and they're just like sitting on the bench mostly, they should get an extra year eligibility for that. Or this is where some of it'll kind of go away based off of what's happening. But there was a lot of players for the last few years that have been working off of having an extra year of eligibility because of COVID. Like COVID years, because the NCAA made a rule during that time where like, hey, if these players go out and play a couple games, they weren't given full seasons for the most part for playing that year, is that, hey, we're going to give pretty much everybody a free pass on the year to where it's not going to count towards your eligibility at all. And that has allowed players to like other than their red shirts and their medical red shirts and all of that, all of those things have led to players being able to play 5, 6, 7 years of college football. Like think about it this way. I think I mentioned this on the last pod, but why am I forgetting his name? Oh no. Carson Beck, right? Carson Beck is 24, 25 years old as a quarterback at Miami right now in his last year of his eligibility. And the wide receiver, Malachi Toney, that he's throwing to, who is 18 years old right now, when you put that age into context, Carson Beck, when he was walking onto campus at Georgia, the wide receiver he is now throwing to, Malachi Toney, was 10, 11 years old. Was 11 years old at that point. So the fact that there is that big of an age gap within the sport of college football, I feel like is definitely a problem, and that needs to be addressed. But I think that part of that will go away because you're going to have less people that have the COVID years, and those are pretty much going to go away because they're being used on the people that were around in college football during that time. So that part will go away. But I think in general, if you just made the rule is that if you get 5 years in college football, no matter what, like by hook or by crook, unless there is like you get catastrophic injuries, you have 5 years to get in and play. And if you don't make it happen within that time, you're done, unless you're talking about a major injury that has kept you from being able to play. And I think I totally agree with that, man, because I think there does need to be kind of like an age cap on some of these players, because I'm not going to go down the route of saying that they're taking opportunities away from younger kids coming out of high school that could have those opportunities, because now college football teams are now like wanting to get older at certain positions so they can go and have the best chance to win, because having a 5-star 18 years old that needs to develop, or a 3-star that's 25 years old that's played over 1,000 snaps in college football, what would you rather have in a 1-year sample size? A lot of teams are now going towards the Indiana model where they're going to rather take that 24, 25-year-old that's played a ton of football in a 1-year sample size so they can get the best of what you can get and be able to have your most team success for a 1-year scenario. So I think there is some credence to the idea of taking away opportunities from younger kids, but I'm not going to go down that route because kids can now just transfer to somewhere else if they don't think they're getting the opportunity they need to get. But it's just like, I just feel like it's a little bit of a competitive imbalance that I think you need to fix over time. And I think potentially just having the 5 years, straight up 5 years, you have to go and do everything you can in college football. If not, or unless you have a very catastrophic injury, you're done after 5. I just feel like that'll be a very hard and fast rule, so you don't necessarily have to go through all of these players suing the NCAA and like trying to like, hey, we deserve an extra year because of this, that, and the other. I just feel like there's a lot of gray area to where this stuff can kind of be argued to us to a point, and I just think that overall, if you just changed it to just being 5 years, unless for catastrophic injury, I feel like that would help a lot when it comes to a lot of these points right now we're dealing with players looking to play 5, 6, 7 years of college football, and it's a little bit of a competitive imbalance, I think. So getting off of that, I don't think I have anything else story-wise to talk about in college football. So let's go ahead and get to the game. There's only one game left in the college football season / college football playoff, and it's the national championship game between Miami and Indiana. And this game is in Miami, I think in their stadium too, right? Or am I crazy? Hold on, I gotta see this real quick. Yeah, the national championship game will be played at Hard Rock Stadium. Is that in Miami? Is that in their own stadium, or is that the Dolphins Stadium? Hold on, I gotta check now. That's in the Dolphins Stadium, right? Isn't that where Miami plays anyway? See, these are probably questions I probably should have asked myself before I got into this. Where does the Miami Hurricanes play? Oh, they moved their, so they're playing at Hard Rock when they play at home. Okay, so that makes sense. So University of Miami will be playing in their home stadium when they go and play in the national championship game against Indiana. I think that will be obviously more than a big development for them having a potential home field advantage. But I have read that their fans are kind of going to that game like crazy. And because of that, the ticket prices for that game are out of this world. So I do think Indiana fans are making it as hard as possible. They're trying to get into that game to kind of help support their team and be able to be there for that moment. But I do think having this scenario happen, I feel like is a little bit of a weird one because you have so many teams. Like, it's just a weird spot, right? But again, it is what it is. Miami's going to have a little bit of potentially home field advantage. Again, you won't really know until you turn on the game and watch it and see how many, what color jerseys are in the stands for each team. So we'll get a better idea then. But I'm just going to take a guess and say Miami will probably have a little bit more of the dominant number of people in the stands rooting for them in comparison to who's rooting for Indiana. So about the game, how do I think about this game? I think I talked about this on the last pod where it's starting to feel like my Indiana is like the team of destiny to a certain degree with how these games have been working and how they've been destroying teams and how really things haven't been close. And other than a few games that they've played this year, and they've still come out on the good side of them for all of them. And I'm coming into this game, I'll talk about Indiana first. Like, Indiana's coming in with the better quarterback. I think the better quarterback, not necessarily by talent, but by just like knowing what he's doing and like just the way that he's playing right now. I think I would take why am I forgetting his name? I would take Fernando Mendoza on a 1-game sample size before I would take Carson Beck. If I had to go out and win one game, I would take Fernando right now if you had to pick between the two. Running back wise, like, you have the two-headed monster of Indiana or Mark Fletcher from Miami side. I think I guess if you add that in with the offensive line, I think Miami is a better running team than they are a passing blocking team. So I think running back wise, I would take Miami, but I think offensive line, I think I'd rather take Indiana's offensive line because I think they're just a lot better at blocking for the pass. And I think when they do kind of get things rolling, I think they can run the football pretty effectively. Even though Miami has some real dogs at the offensive lineman position, and I think they have some real like from the mud type of dudes that are big and they can get after you. but I just think they're not nearly as good when it comes to pass blocking, and I think that's why I give Indiana the nod there. Wide receiver wise, I think I'd probably go Indiana because I think their collection of wide receiver talent's a lot better. If you're just going to take one wide receiver for this game, I think Malachi Tony is probably the most talented guy on both of these rosters at wide receiver. But I think overall, Indiana just has a good core wide receivers that always know what they're doing. They're going to make the right plays every single time. And when you throw the ball up to them and give them their opportunities to catch the football, more often than not, they're not going to drop them. And that's why, and I think, I'm not going to sit here and say Miami's their wide receivers are dropping the football, really. But I will say that Malachi Tony's a little bit smaller, and I think he can get a little bit of raced out of games. They do use him as a decoy very well in that Miami offense, but I just think in general it's going to be a lot harder to get Malachi Tony the ball in comparison to what you're going to be doing for the rest of all the Indiana players. And to the other players on Miami's roster that like pass catchers and all of that, I just think that they have some athletes, but it's just like it's more of a surprise when they do produce and have a good day, while Indiana has 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that all produce, and if you leave them one-on-one, they're going to make the right play, and they're going to be able to get that ball to them from Fernando Mendoza. And that's where I would give Indiana the credit and like kind of a slant towards them on that as well. And then defensively, man, I think Miami's front seven, I think, is way more talented. And just, again, this is a tale of the two tapes because Indiana's team, when it comes to star-wise and like what their athletes are not the same athletic as what Miami's are. But what I would say in general is that Indiana just knows what they're doing as a football team. They're very well coached. Very rarely are their players in the wrong spots where they're supposed to be. They're going to fit their gaps how they're supposed to. They're going to be on the wide receiver they're supposed to. You're not really getting a big play over them by them messing up their coverage. It's going to be you're going to have a player go out there and take it from their DBs and like really make a huge play. And I think Miami has done Indiana's done a great job of, if any team's going to try to score on them, it's going to be by dinking and dunking down the field. You're not going to get a lot of big plays on this Indiana defense. So I just think I'd give Indiana probably a little bit of the edge, even though they're not as talented. I just feel like when it comes to the scheme that they use and how they do it and with the players they do so, I think it's just a perfect meld of having a good defensive mind calling the plays to where players know what they're doing and it's very easy for them, but also like they're not getting out of their spots where they're like not supposed to be. And I just think that overall the consistency that Indiana's defense will have, I just think leads to, I think overall this Indiana team is just a better football team from top to bottom. And in a way that I think Miami, when it comes to like their first 40, 45 players on their roster, they're all 5 stars and they're all very good and they're all very well compensated. But I just think as a team, I think Indiana is just a better overall team. And then when it comes to Miami, Carson Beck is fine. He's made the plays necessary when he has to in big moments. But it's just, I think in this game, Miami might have to, they're going to have to put more of the game on Carson Beck's shoulders. I just don't think you're going to be able to run the football on Indiana in the same way that you have the last couple of games with Mark Fletcher. And I think that they're going to be able to put a spy on Carson Beck to kind of keep him in check, to not get those not game breaking, but like when you're a defense and you're trying to get another team to get off the field, and the next thing you know, you get them to 3rd and 10, or you get them to 3rd and 9, and you think you have it in your bag, and you're going to get off the field, and then Carson Beck hits you with just enough yardage using his legs to convert and get the first down. I feel like that can really take the wind out of a defense, and I just think Indiana's going to make sure that's not going to happen. They're going to make Carson Beck sit back there and make some big throws if they're going to win the game, and I think Indiana is going to be very good at that, and they're going to make it very hard on Carson Beck to make some of the plays he's made over the last couple weeks in the playoff, like just keeping the team moving and keeping them on schedule. Mark Fletcher is a great back, but I just think, and the offensive line is awesome too. They have a bunch of maulers up there on the offensive line, but it's just the way that Indiana does it. They do a lot of twists, stunts, all this other stuff to make an offensive line have to think about what's going on instead of just going out there and blocking the man in front of them. And I think because of that, I think the offensive line, as talented as they are, they're going to really have some trouble early on in that game stopping the Indiana defensive line from getting to the quarterback or stopping the run game altogether. So I do think that's going to be a big challenge for them. Like I said, for the Miami pass catchers, led by Malachi Tony, who is their big threat guy. But outside of him, they have a few like decent dudes, but it's just nothing that is going to kill you if like they're not getting separation. You're not going to get a lot of big plays going down the field unless unless you like totally whiff on your coverage. Like they're not going to run past you for the most part in that Miami wide receiver room. And I think overall that's why they have such a quick passing offense. And yeah, if you give them a free big play down the field, they'll take it. But they're not going to be a team that's going to rely on those big plays. They're going to try to nickel and dime you throughout the down the football field, along with their run game, to really do it. And I just think Miami may not be as good at that against Indiana as they have been against prior teams they have played in the playoff run. And then defensively, I just don't think Miami has the secondary, like, because Indiana has a lot of big wide receivers. I think all three of their guys are like, they're bigger dudes. Like, they don't really have a small wide receiver on that roster, at least that plays a lot of minutes for that Indiana offense. And I think with that, Miami's defensive backs are going to have a really tough time stopping the guys that Indiana will be able to throw out there wide receiver-wise. And it's going to be jump balls. It's going to be back shoulder throws. And, heck, there are going to be a few times we're going to try to bust coverage and, like, get it down the field as well. And that's something Miami's going to have to deal with their secondary and their DBs. So I just think, all in all, I just think Indiana has a team from top to bottom that can win this game. Even though Miami has a team from 1 to 45 to 50, kind of in that range, that all are some of the best players in the country. But it's just Indiana as a football team. I just think they're just a better football team. And I think that'll lead to Indiana finishing off having the perfect season. And on top of that, the coaching too. If you're comparing Curt Cignetti to Mario Cristobal, I would take Curt Cignetti every single time because I think he is an offensive mastermind and he knows how to get the best out of his players. And he's done this for the last 2 years where he has led this team to doing a lot more than anybody ever thought they could. And along with his coaching and like knowing what he's doing offensively and like getting the best out of his players, he's done that in spades. So I think Curt Cignetti in comparison to Mario Cristobal, who I think is I call him a blockhead all the time because I think he is a blockhead. Like whenever you talk to him, it almost feels like you can notice how little gears are moving up there in his brain. Again, I'm being a little bit joking about that, but I just think Mario Cristobal as the head coach for Miami is an offensive and defensive line guy. He's a very good recruiter, but he's not a tactician of any sort when it comes to making game plans and doing all that. He just says, we want run ball with talented guys. Like, I just feel like that's kind of like what his vibe is as a coach. And I think all in all, when you're facing off against a Curt Cignetti, you're going to have a team that's led with a coach with a really good offensive mindset, or if a mindset in general of trying to disrupt. And I just don't think that's what he is really good at. But he's really good at recruiting, and there's players out there that's going to be doing the job, and they're going to try their best. But at some point, you're going to need to kind of scheme something up to make it happen. And I believe in Indiana's coaching staff a little bit more because they've been working with less all this time. And now everybody's looking at it and saying this team is very good, but it's just they've been working with the same players they've been doing the last 2 years for the most part, other than the quarterback, I think. And they weren't able to get the job done, but now they've kind of figured it out, and Fernando Mendoza is making a lot of big plays for it in general because of it. So I would give the coaching aspect a little bit of a bump for Indiana as well. And I think all in all, I think Indiana wins this football game. I think they're the more complete team. I think they're the better coach team. I think Fernando Mendoza is playing at such a high level right now. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's going to make the right play every single time. The whole team is going to make the right plays because I think all those players know what their job is, and they're going to work their hardest at making sure that they don't have to talk about how they didn't do what they were supposed to do in that particular play. That's just not how Indiana does it. And I think all in all, I think that leads towards having the success that they've had this year. And I think that is going to be able to prevail over a Miami team that I think is a lot more talented. But again, I just think even with all the talent they have, they still have a Carson Beck who I question in comparison to what Fernando Mendoza has been doing all year. And I think that I question what Miami, when it comes to all the talent they have, I think their pass catchers have been underwhelming for most of the process. And I just don't think Indiana is going to let them free it on. I don't think they're going to let Miami just run the football down their throats either. So I just think all in all, I'll take Indiana to win this football game. I think it's just their year, man. And I think it's going to be a third year in a row that a Big Ten team wins a national championship. And again, I would have liked it to be Ohio State doing it for a back-to-back year, for sure. But I think Miami fans don't deserve. I've been talking about this on prior pods. Like their fans don't deserve to have a national championship. They really don't. Most of them are fair weather fans. I want to say most, not all of them, because I think there are some real diehards out there. But I just think most of their fans are fair weather fans that when they're not doing good, there's other things to do in Miami and they're not really paying attention. But now that they're winning, they want to all jump in like they've been here the whole time. And I just don't think that's the case. And you can tell that but by when it comes to attendance and how much they don't have people, their own fans, showing up to their games when they're at home when they don't have a national title run coming up. I just think that that's really the case. And I think because of that, I think I'll take Indiana and I'll at least root for them in this scenario where I'm like, I can at least get behind the story of like, this may be one of the best stories in all of college football history if they can finish this off. I really do think it can be. I really do. So that's all I got on the game. I think Jace also picked Indiana as well. I think he's been on the Indiana bandwagon for a minute now. So I think we both picked Indiana to win this game and kind of win the national championship and finish off the story the right way. So, all right. So that's it for the college football stuff. Let's go ahead and get to the NFL. Let me get to the stories first, NFL wise, and then I will get to the games. Let's see here. Story wise in the NFL, the coaching stuff, right? I think we've talked about a lot of the. I did a lot of the coaching. I talked about Mike Tomlin not having a job anymore. Let me just do a review of the teams that do not have coaches as of right now. Let's see. NFL. Nope. NFL coaching vacancies. I think it's like 8 or 9 right now that don't have coaches. Sorry, I think it's one less now that, one of them took a job. Let's see here. When it comes to teams with vacancies, you have the Cleveland Browns, you have the Arizona Cardinals, you have the Miami Dolphins, you have the Las Vegas Raiders, you have Tennessee Titans, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have the Falcons, and then you have the Baltimore Ravens. Those are now the teams. The Giants were also in that list a couple days ago, but as of, I think, yesterday, I think it's been reported that John Harbaugh is going to be the next head coach there at the Giants, and they haven't necessarily ironed out a contract as of yet, but they are working that out, and I think if they're not going to announce that all this is happening, if it's going to end up going up in smoke. So I think Harbaugh will end up there. It just depends on what they're going to do and make the contract work and make sure he has the money that he wants, because I think it was reported that he wanted like $20 million to coach per year, whatever he was going to go next after being fired from Baltimore. So that is a big deal. And hold on, do I want to talk? Yeah, let's get to that. So how do I think this fit is going to work with Harbaugh going to the Giants? I think it's a perfect kind of fit for what they need right now. I think they need an adult in the room to get the job done. I think for what they've gone through these last few years is Daboll and him not necessarily being a good people person and not being the most liked amongst not only the locker room but amongst his own peers in his own team and the GM role and all of that. And I think in general, I just think that getting rid of a guy like Daboll, who's a little bit fiery and that was a little bit off the handle at times, being able to get a guy like Harbaugh that has been doing it for as long as he has and commands respect of the players and knows what he's been doing. He's been working with a great organization for the last 18 years of his NFL coaching career with the Baltimore Ravens. So I just think that him going from Baltimore now going to the Giants can kind of take some of the good things that he was experienced from being with Baltimore for so long and kind of help tweak what the Giants are doing and kind of build themselves up into being a team that everybody thinks they can be in this NFL, where they can be, I'm not going to say here and say annual contenders, but they can at least get out of the laughingstock portion of being of that type of team, what they are right now as an organization. So I think it's a relatively good fit. I think it is a little bit weird with the whole, I think that by them hiring him, I think they're pretty locked in on what they have in Jackson Dart, and they think that Harbaugh can help develop that and not necessarily hinder that at all. I think it has been reported that he is going to try to bring Todd Monken in as the OC, the same Todd Monken that was the OC for Lamar the last few years, where Lamar got multiple MVPs and a couple All Pros as well, and like that and also he was the OC at Georgia too, where they won their back-to-back national titles. So the idea that he is going to be able to, was he there for both years, or was he there just that first year, and then it was a different guy the second year? I'm not sure about that, but he was at Georgia as well and won a national title as an OC. So having him be able to come in and pair him up with Jackson Dart and kind of bring the best out of him when it comes to an offense, I think it's a pretty big match made in heaven on that. Because think about it, the last great talent he did with was Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying that Jackson Dart is Lamar Jackson by any means when it comes to talent, but I will say that Todd Monken knows how to bring out the best in a player, and I think that Jackson Dart has some real raw tools there to mold. I really do think so. Whether inside of his own brain he can get through the idea that, hey, you probably need to protect yourself a little bit more and not use your head and like take some of these big hits you've been taking this past season. That's something he's going to have to take on his own and like really learn that lesson. But if he learns that lesson, then you get the Todd Monken, and you're going to get some real weapons back. You're going to get Malik Neighbors back at some point, and hopefully draft another wide receiver at to some degree. Maybe not in the first round, but in later rounds in this upcoming draft this year. I do think the Giants can be turned around pretty quickly. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to be in like playoff contention in their first year, but I do think from being at like 4 wins where they're at right now to getting to 7, 8, 9 wins next year would be a huge improvement. And I think that Harbaugh going in there, I think they are going to give him this time and space to make it happen and really revitalize that team in the way that he wants it to be built. And I think because of that, they'll be a more disciplined team. They'll know what they're doing there. They'll have the belief in their own coach that he can get them to the promised land because he's done it before. Again, he did it with Joe Flacco as the quarterback and like all those great talented players on defense. But again, he got it done. So the player's going to have to give him a good portion of respect and realize like, hey, maybe he can get us where we need to go. So I do think Harbaugh is and here's the only caveat I have on all this is that the whole thing with the GM and him is that because one of the rules that he was making for whatever coaching whatever coaching job he was going to take, one of the demand or the asks or demands, however you want to take it, is that he wanted to have more like full control of the roster, to have final say when it comes to the roster, which kind of makes him the pseudo GM as well, right? With the way that kind of is worded. And then if he's not the GM himself, he wants to be able to have a say on who the GM is and not have a GM automatically over him when he takes the job, whatever job he was going to take. And as of right now, before he even got hired, like they only fired Daboll. They did not fire their GM, Joe Shane. And I think with that being the case, how are they going to come together in this upcoming offseason and then going into next year, where one of Harbaugh's asks was that he got a chance to either help pick the new GM or if that he could have the final say on the roster. I'm not sure how he'd deal with that or how Joe Shane would deal with the idea that he was pretty close to being fired on his own accord, and now he's going to be hiring a coach. He's being forced to hire a coach that may have wanted him fired from the get-go, and that also has major say as to who's going to have like the last say on what player's going to get picked in the draft or who's going to get picked up in free agency. Like, I just feel like that's a weird dynamic to start off with. And I just think that it'll lead to a little bit of sabotaging to a certain extent if it doesn't go well between those two. And I think that might create a little bit of a weird scenario. Because if it comes down to it and the owner has to pick between the GM and the head coach, he's going to pick the head coach that he's paying a lot more money to do the job that he's doing in comparison to what the GM is. Especially since, like I said before, that the GM probably should have been fired this year or last year. After the whole thing with Saquon, like on the Hard Knocks show and like all the decisions that they've been making, like there was no reason to stick with one having the same GM and then go to a new head coach because they're not necessarily going to be all the way aligned on what they're trying to do. And I've long maintained this thought that if you're going to hire a new coach, you better just hire a new GM too and have him be locked in at the hip, because if you just and tell them from the get go is if one is fired, both of y'all are fired. So they can't. So literally, they both have to go either sail high amongst the stars together, or you're going to sink together with the ship. There is no kicking the other guy down to make sure you get to keep your job and they go. That's been like that. I think would be a more. It would just lead to having some real stakes on both of you. So they have to stay in unison. Like there is no turning against each other if everybody's under the same idea that if one guy is gone, everybody is. I just think that would lead to some more like cohabitable situation. And I think because of how the Giants have managed to get this job done, how the ownership decided to do this by keeping the GM and now hiring Harbaugh, I think it's leading to it might lead to a sticky situation if they're not totally aligned on everything from the get go when it comes to the draft and signing players from free agency and all of that. So I think it could be a little bit messy, but who knows? We'll see. But from there, you have him gone, and now he's taken that job. And you know what's funny is that he gets fired from the Baltimore job, and when you look at all these jobs that were open up until he took the Giants job, he got fired from the place that now has the best opening for any other candidate out there. Because I just think the fact that Baltimore will be the team that's open, they have a quarterback that is in the prime of his career, and that is like perennially a top 5 guy in all of the NFL. On top of the fact they have a great GM, they have a very good organization that has a really good owner, and I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to give you all the time in the world to get the job done, but I do think they're going to have a lot more patience by comparison to like a lot of the other organizations in the NFL. Not the Steelers, of course, because the Steelers have had 3 coaches in 50 years with what the Steelers like to do. I think the Steelers have made it a real pride in not firing head coaches in a way that Baltimore has not necessarily been that way. But I do think when it comes to overall stability, having a quarterback, I think is probably the best job, and Harbaugh got fired from that job. So now with the jobs that are left, now you're talking about Baltimore, you're talking about Pittsburgh. If I had to rank the jobs, I think we already did this game between me and Jace, but I would take Baltimore at 1, Pittsburgh at 2. I'd probably take Atlanta at 3 with all the talent that they have. There's no guarantee they have a quarterback or not, so I think that might be a little bit of a problem. But I just think all the talent they have around, who cares that quarterback now? They just have so much talent around that team, both defensively and offensively. I think they're going to have whatever coach takes on that job is going to be starting from a good position when it comes to talent acquisition for the football team. Or trade pieces if you want to trade some of them and get pieces back to kind of help supercharge your build for the next few years. I think the Falcons are a really good match, and I think that's why I have them 3. Number 4, I'd probably take the Raiders because they do have their number 1 overall pick. They have a very clean roster when it comes to like not having a lot of dudes they owe a lot of money to. They have a really good tight end in Brock Bowers. It's a guy you don't have to replace at all. And then everything else, you kind of get to go in and kind of like have your own, if you're the coach, kind of like have your own idea as to how you want the team to look. And I think there's no way to go but up for this organization and for this team. And I think the only guys that are left is Max Crosby and why am I forgetting his name now? Oh no, I literally just said his name. Brock Bowers. Those 2 are the best players you have on that roster. Everybody else is free game. And I feel like whether to trade them or whether to replace them, all of it. And I just think that is a very appealing spot, especially with an owner that's very rich and is willing to spend money and do all of that. I feel like it's a very good spot. Maybe a little bit more dysfunctional in comparison to some of the teams that are ahead of them in my ranking, but I think it's a very good spot. So number 4 I would take is probably Tennessee because they do already have their quarterback figured out. It is a lack of overall talent in general, and I do think that the ownership is a little bit weird in how that's going because they have a new owner that's been more recent over the last few years. They had Vrabel in their office, and they picked the GM over Vrabel, and now Vrabel's off with the Patriots doing some really good things there, and they've now fired that GM they picked over Vrabel, and then hired 2 GMs since then. So, like, they weren't even locked in on the decision that they made, and they got rid of a very good head coach to do so. So that part is a little bit weird, but you do already have your quarterback locked in. I do think Cam Ward is a very good guy, very good player. You have I think it's like a top 5 pick or something like that to go pick up another player to kind of help out your team in general. And then I just think overall there's nowhere to go but up. And not to mention you're going to be in a very winnable division. You're in the AFC South. You have to deal with Jacksonville and Houston, but I think they're just up and down as organizations. You know where you're going to guarantee that either one of them are going to just dominate that whole division for years to come. I do think that the Tennessee Titans really can build. Not to mention, I think they're going to have a little more patience, and I think that they have a lot more talent they need to build around Cam Ward. So I think they're just going to have a tad bit more patience. You're going to have a little bit more time to kind of build that team up before you're going to really have to be asked any questions about, hey, why aren't we winning more games? And then that was 5. I would go. Would I go Miami 6 or would I go Arizona 6? I'd probably go Arizona 6. They do have Kyler Murray, who they either have to get rid of or trade or draft or something like that. So they are going to have to deal with the Kyler Murray thing. But I think outside of that, they have a very, I'm not going to say good foundation, but they have some foundational players on that squad. They have Marvin Harrison Jr. They have Trey McBride. They have guys like Budda Baker, and they have some like younger defensive guys that played a lot of football this year that I think they can build around. And I think they have a really good state they live in. They have a really good city where players are going to want to go there when it comes to when they're free agents and all of that. And I just think overall, I think it's a team with a very low floor right now that can be built up however you'd like to. And I think Arizona is going to, they're probably a little bit more quick hair, trigger, happy. Sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? They have a really hasty trigger finger when it comes to firing coaches and trying to get a new guy in. So I think you're going to deal with a little bit of that, but I do think there's nowhere to go but up for that team because they've had such deficiencies at certain positions. And I feel like once you kind of get the Kyler Murray thing figured out and figure out a new quarterback, I think this team could be a lot better. Because think about it. I think they were playing a lot better with Jacoby Brissett as their backup coming into the games and just running the offense. I think they played a lot better over time. And I just think that getting a little bit more of that, maybe a tad bit more talent in that spot, I think could lead to them winning a lot more games. So I think that one was 6. I would probably go with Miami at 7. Because I think Miami has some talented guys, but I just think that overall they have a really big culture problem. Ownership, I think, is very unstable in general. And I think that they already gave all that money to Tua that they're going to have to eat over the next couple years. Do they even have their first round pick? I don't think so. Let me see. They have the 11th overall picks. They don't really have a great draft pick to kind of help fix their squad as of right now. And they just need a whole culture shift, man. I feel like they've been messing around so much with old boy, what's his name? Josh McDaniel. Nope. Mike McDaniel. That's his name. They've been messing around with him for so long, and I think they have some real players that really have to figure some things out on whether they actually playing for the team or just being where they're at as a location. And I feel like they really need to get they need to wipe away that whole slate clean and really build up from the bottom up. And I think it's going to be a lot of work to get there, which is why I think I probably have them second to last at 7. And I'd probably go Cleveland Browns at 8. They don't have a quarterback. They have a really good draft pick, and this is not a really great quarterback draft as of right now. But they don't they have a lot. Their defense is very well overpaid, a little bit older. Myles Garrett obviously is one of the best defensive players in the NFL. But outside of that, they've paid a lot of dudes on that defense, and their defense is good, but it's not good enough to be paid as high as they are. And offensively, you really don't have Harold Fannin, the tight end, is pretty good. Like I said, you already don't have a quarterback. Shador is not really the guy long term, I don't think. And then wide receiver wise, you don't have a lot of great weapons like Jerry Jeudy. The guy has stone hands half the time. And then you're dealing with you just don't have you have Quinshon Judkins, who is the running back, but he had a very horrific injury in this past season. He's gonna have to come back from. But you just have a lack of talent there. The ownership is a little bit weird and not really all that great. Their GM, they fired their coach and then kept the GM Andrew Berry, which I'm I don't think he's been okay drafting, but I don't think it's been that ironclad to where they you can't get rid of him at all. Because I just think, again, hiring a new head coach but keeping your GM that's been there is a little bit of a weird scenario where they're not locked in at the hip, man. They're just not. That's just not how it's going to go. And I just think all that, not to mention they have so much money that they have put in dead cap hits because of Deshaun Watson's contract that's fully guaranteed. So they don't even have a lot of money to play with when it comes to signing new players to try to help out their team. Not to mention they live in a spot in Cleveland where that is not a free agent destination by any means. So even if you do get a player that like you want to try to get to come there, you're going to have to overpay them because they're like, hey, I have to go live in Cleveland. I don't want to fucking do that. I'd rather go play with potentially a better team in a better place rather than come to Cleveland. Unless you overpay me, which is then that's when I'll decide to come there. So I think the Cleveland Browns are by far the worst job available. So that's all. I went through all the jobs real quick. I think I did it with Jace before, but it wasn't really all that in depth, and I kind of wanted to do it myself since Jace ain't here to stop me. But so that's all the jobs that are left. Obviously, I talked about my Steelers already. I already had the whole breakdown and all that, getting emotional about Mike Tomlin. But if I had to choose as a fan real quick, I'm just going to my fan brain real quick as what I want for the team. I just need an offensive guy to help, kind of build into the future and have a little bit better offensive line play and have some better offense. Because, again, like I've said before, winning in the regular season, you need to have offense to play. And heck, even in the playoffs, man, I get it. Defenses win playoff games. I totally agree with that. But, like, just scoring 10, 15 points to win a football game in the playoffs is not going to cut it. Like, you really need to have an offense that can score, and like, especially in big moments when you have to go out there and win the game. And I think that, again, if you take one of those defensive whiz kids, I can get behind it. I can get the idea. But I just think you're going to still go into the same issue with now you're going to have to keep replacing your offense coordinator. If they're good, if you get a new offense coordinator, if they're good, they'll end up getting a head coaching job anyway, and you're going to have to replace them again. Or they're going to be bad, and you're going to have to fire them and now have to find a new guy. And I feel like it's just a little bit of a kind of like spinning your wheels for the offensive coordinator position if you go a defensive coach route instead of going with like an offensive head coach route, to where if you have an offensive guy that can be your play caller and head coach, I do, especially if they're going to be a little bit younger, because, the Steelers only want to hire guys that they can keep for 15, 20 years. I feel like if they're going to hire a little bit younger, get an offensive guy, I feel like they really can have a long-term hire that can really help themselves out for the future. And again, on top of the other things where, they have to not be paying the most on their defense in all the NFL, I think it's going to take a huge shift. They're going to probably have to get rid of a few guys. Like, there's going to be a lot of changes they're going to have to do on top of the head coach. But I think that going in with an offensive head coach, a little bit younger, I think will be a great first step into making me think like maybe they're going to make some real changes for the better coming into the next few years and trying to build back up to, the standard being the standard of actually potentially making real playoff runs rather than just making the playoffs and then losing in the first game that you play in against some of these better teams that are just built better from the ground up by comparison to what the Steelers have been over the last 5 years or so, ever since Big Ben left. On top of getting a quarterback, of course, that's also going to be a big deal. Whether through the draft or through getting somebody in free agency, that's also going to be an option too. But again, having an offensive head coach will lead to having better overall quarterback play. Even if you don't have the best quarterback, you're going to be able to manage a lot more because you're going to have a really good offensive coordinator, play caller that can kind of manage the situation. And that's all I got on the coaching stuff. Is there any other stories I want to talk about in the NFL before I get to the games? Let's see here. Oh, the one thing. Dante Moore, the quarterback for Oregon, he was a potential, like, if he were to come out from Oregon and go into the draft, everybody was saying he'd be like a top 5, top 10 draft pick pretty much without an issue, because there's only one quarterback everybody has pretty much locked in as like the number one guy for this year's quarterback class, and that's Fernando Mendoza. But the number 2 guy everybody was saying was Dante Moore, and maybe like talking about how he might be even more talented than Fernando Mendoza, might be a little bit more of an NFL guy by comparison. So like it was, people were really waiting on seeing what he would decide to do when it comes to whether he was going to come out of school or not and go into the NFL. And then he announced during this past week that he was going to stay at Oregon for another year. And a lot of the news is based off of saying that he is so against having to potentially go to the New York Jets and that having that be the start of his NFL career, that he's going to forego the draft for another year and hope that he can come out next year and have a better chance to go to a better organization that will lead to him having some more long-term success, on top of the fact that he's a younger quarterback in general. It's only had about 16, 18 starts in his college career, and having some more starts will help you have better long-term success in the NFL as well. But again, the main story is the fact that he's trying to stay away from having the Jets potentially pick him. But I only have two caveats to that, right? One, if you were to come out next year, there's no guarantee you'd be coming out and being as highly rated as you would be coming out now, right? So this year, all you have to do was Fernando Mendoza, and then pretty much the rest of the quarterback draft is kind of like, ugh, right? But coming out of next year, you're going to be dealing with the Arch Mannings, however good he ends up being by the time he goes through next year. But then he did show some real signs this past season, especially at the end of the year, of playing a lot better, up to the kind of talent that everybody thought he had. Then you're going to be dealing with maybe Julian Say, and you're going to be dealing with some of these other great I think it's going to be multiple 3, 4, 5 quarterbacks that everybody's looking towards potentially being first-round picks in next year's draft. So I just feel like there's going to be a lot more dudes to have to fight with in order, if you want to be the highest pick you could possibly be and get the most guaranteed money, obviously, because in the NFL, the higher you get picked, the more money you get as a contract. And I feel like you're rolling the dice on that. But again, I get the idea that you're just like, you don't want to start with the Jets because you start at such a weird spot to where they don't have a lot of great quarterback coaching. They're keeping the same head coach that they had last year, which isn't like nobody's really in love with the idea of them keeping the coach because he's a defensive guy. Why am I forgetting that guy's name? Hold on. Let's see here. The Jets head coach, Aaron Glenn. So he didn't do all that great of a job this past season. They have some talent. They have a wide receiver. But they traded away some of their better players this past year. So the idea of being a young quarterback, going to a place where they don't really have a great track record of developing quarterbacks with a newer head coach, who knows if he's actually going to be a long-term guy for them. And even though you do get the money that you're going to get being a top draft pick, what does that matter if you're not going to have a long NFL career? If you're not going to be set up for success for your future? So I get the idea of him kind of not going out, but I do think he is taking a risk. Not only on whatever he's going to have to deal with next year when it comes to other guys getting drafted, but what happens if he comes out next year for Oregon and sucks? Like as high as his stock was for this upcoming draft, by the time next year rolls around, like there's only room to go down. Like I don't think there's really a lot of room to go up from where he's at right now. So he really is taking some risk when it comes to betting on himself, that not only will he be able to either keep his level of play the same or even elevate that going like in next year, as well as now you're dealing with all the other quarterbacks that have an opportunity to come out with you and would have to be other pillars in your way to potentially get drafted as high as you would like to be. So I do think those are the two biggest issues. But again, when it comes to the Jets, man, I totally understand the fear of not wanting to have to play for that organization because, again, it's been bad for a lot of different dudes that's had to play there over a very good period of time over the last 10 years or so. So I get the idea of not feeling great about it. Other stories I want to talk about. Seahawks head coach really optimistic that Darnold plays because I think it came out coming into this past week that Darnold was dealing with an oblique injury, I believe. Yeah, it was an oblique injury, and everybody's worried about whether he was going to play or not because, again, I don't even know who their backup is. And then Sam Darnold, as much as he has kind of struggled as of recently, he is their best chance to win these football games because he is a very talented quarterback, and he's been playing very good for the most part this year. So the idea of him potentially not being able to play in this first playoff game in the second round would definitely be an issue. But as of right now, they're saying that Mike McDonald, their head coach, is saying that he's very optimistic that he's going to play. So that is definitely be a huge deal that he'll be able to go out and play in that game because they're going to be playing against San Fran. Again, San Fran is so hurt defensively that I think as long as Seattle is able just to put up some relatively good points, they can score around 20 points. I do think they probably win this game just because their defense is so smothering, and I think they're going to be that big of a hindrance on that San Fran offense. But San Fran's going to get theirs. You're not going to be able to hold, I think earlier, like when they played in the last game this past season, I think the Seahawks held San Fran like 3 points, which is the lowest that San Fran has scored under Shanahan as their head coach. And they kept Christian McCaffrey on his lowest run total that he's had since he's been a San Francisco 49er. So again, the Seahawks defense is very good, and they're very aware of what the 49ers like to do offensively and all that. So I do think they're going to have a very good chance of slowing down the Niners, but like holding them to 3 points again is not going to be a guarantee, even with San Fran now not having Kittle in this game in comparison to what they had in the last time they played each other. So I think it's going to be even harder for the Niners, but if there's any coach that can kind of scheme some things open and figure it out, is Shanahan. So I think that the Seahawks just guaranteeing like, hey, we're going to hold them to under 10 points, not necessarily going to be the case. So like just saying, hey, if we can score 20 in this, get 2 or 3 touchdowns in this game, I think you'll have a very good chance to win. I think that'll be that'll be a lot easier having Sam Darnold be able to be the quarterback to do that job for you. Next story, Texans wide receiver Nico Collins with a concussion. He is ruled out against the Patriots. He did experience that concussion in that last game against Pittsburgh. I think it happened early on in that game. He managed to come back, and then he ended up getting hit again in the third quarter. And then they said he was woozy, looked very bad, that he wasn't able to, he didn't know where he was, and it was like very disorienting, and he was not able to go for the end of that game. So now with it being a short week, there was pretty much no chance he was going to be able to come back for this game because of how bad that concussion looked. So that's going to be a big deal. I'm not going to lie to you, because he is their biggest weapon on offense for Houston. And based off of how bad the Houston offense looked last week against Pittsburgh, again, I don't think the New England Patriots have the same defense as the Pittsburgh Steelers defense has. But I think that if CJ does not feel comfortable back there and he doesn't have his number one guy to kind of his safety blanket to kind of throw to, like, can Houston get past that? I think the defense for Houston is going to be awesome, and they're going to be able to really slow the Patriots down. But CJ is going to have to play better than what he played against the Steelers to win this game. So can CJ get through this game and play a lot better in comparison to what he played last week is going to be a big question. It's going to be a little bit harder without having Nico Collins out there for the full game. For the Patriots to have to worry about, because again, he is such a big receiver that is such a huge weapon that I think it just kind of puts a lot of stress on the defense. And I think without him, it is not going to be nearly as much stress on the Patriots defense to have to stop a wide receiver as dangerous as Nico Collins. Next story. Let's see. The Bills, they have activated their defensive tackle Ed Oliver, so that's going to be a huge piece of their defensive line to kind of help go get after Bo Nix and help stop the running game for Denver. So I think that's going to be a big deal, because not only is he a very good pass rusher, but he does help really stop the run for especially in that middle of that Bills defense. That's going to be a huge deal to get him back. And then the wide receiver Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel. He's a Buckeye. I should get his name right all the time. He is not Denver wide receiver. It's going to be for the Bills. Curtis Samuel for the Bills. Wide receiver is going to be coming off of injured reserve. So both of them coming back is definitely going to be a huge help. Curtis Samuel, because of how thin the Bills are at wide receiver, Curtis Samuel has always been that kind of H-back guy in the NFL that can, like, he just kind of picks the right spot to kind of make a big play. And again, they're not really using him as like a star guy. They're bringing him in every once in a while, and it feels like every single time they have a chance and he's out there, he does manage to show out there and make a big play and kind of do some things. So like having another wide receiver to add, again, most of this team, the way that they're built for the Buffalo, they're built to run the football. They're built for Josh Allen to kind of dink and dunk down the field. Not a lot of huge plays coming out of that offense because their wide receiver core isn't necessarily the greatest when it comes to big plays. But if you can get another wide receiver like Curtis Samuel that's been in that offense for a while, and that has a little bit of speed to kind of make some bigger plays after the catch, I feel like will be a huge deal for that Buffalo Bills offense, because they're going against a very good Denver Broncos defense. And I think they're going to make it very hard, and you're going to have to dink and dunk down the field, and they're going to have to run the football. Josh Allen's going to have to use his legs a little bit, and hopefully they can get James Cook more involved in this game than what he was last game against Jacksonville. So I think all in all, they need a lot more help from everybody, and having a guy like Curtis Samuel kind of help out that offense will be a big deal. Let's see. Any other story I want to talk about here? Rams will get one of their offensive linemen back in Kevin Dotson. So they're going to get their I think he's their right guard, right? Kevin Dotson, their right guard, will be back for this game. That'll be a huge help for that offensive line to kind of help protect Matthew Stafford as they go up against that Chicago Bears defense. Again, it's not like Chicago has a very good pass rush at all, but again, having every single guy healthy as you can is a very good help for that offensive line because, again, like they can run the. I think the Bears are not really good at defensive whatsoever. I think they can't really stop the run. They can't stop the pass. And I think that if the Rams can get into a little bit of a flow, especially with it being as cold as it's going to be, I think they said it's going to be like 10 degrees, and it's going to feel like negative degrees. It's going to be like -5, -10 degrees with wind chill and all of that. Because that stadium is right off a lake in Chicago and everything. So I think as cold as it's going to be, the more they can kind of get the running game going and then kind of use play action and all of that to kind of like just keep the Chicago Bears defense off their on their toes will be a huge deal. And then having one of your starting offensive linemen back for this game will be a huge help towards making that happen. And then for the 49ers, Fred Warner, their linebacker who has been out for months with I think, pectoral injury. Hold on. Let me see here. Coming off injured reserve. He had a fractured and dislocated right ankle. Sorry, it wasn't a pectoral thing. I was totally wrong on that. So it was a fractured and dislocated right ankle that he's coming back from. He's not going to be able to come back this week, but they're saying he is practicing and he's kind of getting back into the rhythm of things. And that if they manage to get through this game against Seattle and they manage to play next week, that he should be able to play. Again, doesn't really help them for this game against Seattle, but if they manage to get through this, I think he'll be a huge add for them next week on whoever they play in the NFC Championship game. But I think it does add itself to be a little bit of a carrot for the rest of the team because they've had so many guys out for this year and they're missing, especially they lost George Kittle last week to his Achilles injury. So, like, potentially being able to kind of rally behind, like, hey, if we can get through one more week, we can have one of our best defensive player come back, at least one of our best defensive players back next week. It can be a huge care for that team overall to kind of, like, rally and try to make the unimaginable happen. Because I think I think it's the biggest spread in this whole divisional round is going to be for this game with the Niners and Seahawks. I think the Seahawks are a 7-point favorite at home. So not a lot of people are believing that the San Fran can really win this game because of how hurt they are. So maybe they can use this as a rallying cry to make it happen. Who knows? But again, we'll see. We'll see what happens on Sunday I think it's Sunday when they play, right? Boom. Saturday. Yeah. No, sorry. No, it'll be Saturday tomorrow. So tomorrow night's game. We'll see what happens tomorrow night if they can make it happen, and we can see Fred Warner in the week after. And then anything else story-wise? I don't think so. Oh, Philly is having a big mess right now. They have AJ Brown thing, whether they want to keep him or not and trade him. I think it's untenable at this point. I think there's no way they can bring AJ Brown back for another year. But I think they're such shrewd businessmen when it comes to the GM and all of that. I think that they can't get a deal that they really want for him. I think they'll be more than happy to try to keep him and bring him back for next season if they're not going to get the deal that they want. And I feel like that's not going to be not going to be very nice if they bring AJ Brown back after everything that has happened this year between him and the team. So I don't know. It's a weird one. They have fired their OC, Kevin Patullo, so I think that is one. He was going to fall on the sword no matter what. I think they have fired him from that job, but they're keeping him on the staff, which is kind of weird. But I think obviously he was never the guy. He was never going to be the guy to fix this offense at all throughout this year. And I think that now you're dealing with having to find a new OC, and then now you're dealing with AJ Brown, whether he's going to stay or not. I feel like that's a lot of things that this Eagles team is like, I don't know, man. It's just a weird mess with this Eagles team all in all. I think Jalen Hurts has a lot of like things he needs to answer for when it comes to his play on the field, because I don't think it's all on the OC and on the wide receivers that things have gone as bad as they have. I think the very highly paid quarterback in Jalen Hurts also needs to take a little bit of responsibility for how that offense is as well. And I think there has been some rumblings that he is a part of the issue as well of not progressing as a quarterback as much as the team would like him to. And not when it comes to just physically, but mentally too, when it comes to reading defenses and making the right decisions and all of that. And maybe like so being so against taking any chance because he doesn't want to have any negative plays that I think hinders your offense a bit. So I do think like overall, I think there's a lot of people that have to ask some real good, really real deep questions about themselves and about everybody else in that team, and whether they can kind of build it back up to come back and like have a chance to, keep winning football games. As talented as they are, there's no reason why they shouldn't be a perennial contender every single year. And I think that it's going to take a little bit of a hit if A.J. Brown gets traded like they probably should, but I think it might help out the whole roster because I think it's been fractured for a little bit now, and I think that whole thing with A.J. Brown is really helping, not really, sorry, it's not helping the situation at all. And again, I'm not sure why they're keeping their head coach either. I think, I don't know, man. He's their head coach. I'm forgetting his name. Not Jeffrey Lurie. That's the owner. I forget what's his name. Not Howie Roseman. That's a GM. Nick Sirianni. I don't know why I had to think so long about his name. But yeah, I'm not sure why they keep Nick Sirianni. He's not really all that great of a head coach. He's not an offensive or defensive guy, more of a vibes guy, and I think he's doing terrible at the vibes thing. And if he's not giving you great vibes as a team and doing the things the way he needs to, and then if he's not going to be an offensive defensive guy and he's making bad hires when it comes to offensive and offensive coordinator, I'm not sure what the hell he's doing there. I really don't know, and nobody on that team really respects him at all. So I'm just like, all in all, I'm not sure why. It's the big old mess down there with Philly, and I'm not sure what they're gonna do to kind of fix it. But we'll see. It's gonna be a little bit of a soap opera over the offseason for sure. All right, that's all the stories I want to talk about. How far are we in? Right, we're about an hour 21, so not too bad. So hopefully I'll be able to finish off this podcast in the next 15, 20 minutes or so, and then get us out of here. So I'm going to make my picks for these games. I do already have Jace's picks, so we're not going to be without those. As of last week, I think we kind of did like a reset for the playoffs. For last week's picks, I went 5-1. Jace went 3-3. I picked Buffalo and he picked Jacksonville. I picked Houston. He picked Pittsburgh. And then we both picked Philly. So that's where the third loss for him. And then the first one loss came for me. So that's the difference for us. I went 5-1. He went 3-3. And now to go on to these next 4 games for this divisional round. So we'll go in order for how they're going to be playing off here. There's going to be 2 games tomorrow. And there's going to be 2 games on Sunday. So that'll be how it works out. And let's go ahead and get to the games here. First one tomorrow. I think it's at 4:30. First game is going to be number 6 Buffalo at number 1 Denver. Jace has picked Denver in this game. Like I said before, man, like Denver has a really good defense. I'm not sure how I feel about Bo Nix, man. Can I trust Bo Nix if like this game becomes a little bit of a shootout in the sense if the Denver defense can't stop Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills offense from scoring, and can Bo Nix kind of, or heck, even if it doesn't get to that point, even if it's not a shootout and Denver needs a last second drive from Bo Nix to win the game, can I trust in Bo Nix to make that happen? I'm not sure if I can. But on Buffalo's side, they have Josh Allen. He's going to do what he needs to do. He's going to keep playing clean football, not making big mistakes, and turning the football over will be a huge one. Because, again, that's always been the narrative with Josh Allen. Like, when he turns on, like, Superman mode with him, like, can he do it without the turnovers? Or is he going to do it with turnovers and it kind of ruins the team even more? And then on top of that, can they get their run game going against a very good Denver defense is a really big question. And if they can't get the run game going, can any of their wide receivers / tight ends get open and kind of help Josh Allen get down the field the way they need to? And then on the Buffalo defense, I think their defense played very good last week. but I do think they have to play against a little bit more talented of a team in Denver. They have a little bit better of a run game than what they had to face last week with Jacksonville. And then on top of that, like they have, I'm not. I think I'd probably take Denver's wide receivers over Jacksonville's. Let me think. Yeah, because I would say I think Jacksonville has more small, speedy receivers, but I think Denver's receivers, I think they're all bigger bodied type of dudes, and I think that might be a little bit more a different challenge for that Buffalo secondary. But I think they've played very well either way, and they're not small dudes in that secondary for Buffalo. But it's just can they keep up and kind of keep everything in front of them and not kind of let any big plays up over their head. Denver is at home, and I think Denver is like a 1.5 point favorite coming into this game. Weather-wise, it's going to be around 40 degrees. It's going to be pretty nice weather. Not going to be anything crazy when it comes to very cold or a bunch of snow or anything. The question is for me, am I going to pick the better team in Denver, or am I going to pick Buffalo and Josh Allen to get the job done? Because he's the best player in the AFC left. I think he might be the best player in the whole freaking tournament. I really do think he might be. In all the playoffs, I think he might be the best player left. And can he kind of keep this momentum going and win this game? I think they can. I'm going to take Buffalo. Screw it, man. Like I said last week when they were going up against Jacksonville, it kind of got to a point for me watching Josh Allen in that game where I'm like, man, he's just like, it feels like Josh Allen's going to make it happen, right? The same feeling that you get with Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow to a certain extent where it almost feels inevitable. And it's just like, hey, they're going to make it happen. It's just when and how. But I do think Josh Allen kind of reached that point last week. And I think Buffalo defense will be able to keep Denver from doing what they want to do offensively enough. And I think Josh Allen's just going to make a few more plays to kind of keep their team in it and kind of get the win. So I'll take Buffalo to win that game. Next game will be number 6 San Fran going to number 1 Seattle. Seattle's coming off a bye. Jace picked Seattle in this game. I think I will match that and take Seattle. I'll give my reasons for it. I just think San Fran's really hurt right now. They're going to be without George Kittle. And again, I think you have to give San Fran and Shanahan a lot of credit for having the next man up mentality all year long. Pretty much everybody on that field has gotten hurt on that team, pretty much other than Christian McCaffrey. I think Christian McCaffrey's been the only guy that's really been there all year long. So I think that they really have embodied that seriously all year. But the thing is that you're missing so many dudes. Defensively, have so many guys hurt. Now you've lost George Kittle as well. And again, I think San Fran's defense has played relatively well in spite of all the injuries that they've had, because they have a really good DC in Robert Saleh that knows what he's doing and kind of get that defense playing the way they need to. But it's just now you're facing off against JSN, and even if you stop him, they have other guys on that roster for Seattle that can beat you, not only running the football but catching it. And I just think in Seattle's defense is going to be so suffocating against that San Fran offense. And now Seattle also won't have to worry about George Kittle. So now their whole plan is going to have to keep Brock Purdy from killing with his legs, stop Christian McCaffrey from getting a ton of passes and catches in this game, and then keep a lot of any big plays from happening with their other wide receivers. Because Jawan Jennings is good for a big play every game for the most part. And then you have a bunch of other dudes that are like, but it's not really consistent enough. So I think Seattle defensively has been one of the better defense in all of the NFL. So I will take them to win this game along with Jace, because I just think San Fran has done as much as they possibly can. If they win this game, I think it'll take a total collapse out of Sam Darnold, which I think is on the board. Sam Darnold has been a dude that has been known to have not his non-best games in the biggest moments, and this counts as a very big moment. But I do think it's time for Sam Darnold to kind of make it happen and kind of take that next step. So I think Sam Darnold, I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be playing amazing, but I do think he's going to he's going to do just enough to not give up the big mistake that'll help them lose this game. So I'll take Seattle along with Jason to win this game, especially they're at home. Too much going their way in this matchup here. Next game, you got number 5 Houston going to number 2 New England. Jace picked New England in this matchup. I think on the New England side, Drake May is going to have to play a lot cleaner football in comparison to what he played in the last time we saw him play. I think that was, what was the first game? I'm forgetting. Against the Chargers, right? The problem is that with him having the fumbling issues and like having the picks that he threw, the thing is that now he's going up against a lot better defense in Houston, man. I'm like, that Houston defense can get after you defensively, and then in the secondary, you're not getting away from them. They're not giving up they've been giving up some big plays, but even when they give up some of these plays, they're going to tackle and they're going to do what they have to do. They have a very physical secondary. They're disruptive up front, and I just think they're going to be able to get after Drake May enough to where I think it'll be very hard on New England offensively. I think it's going to be very hard for them to run the football, pass the football. I think it's just going to be very hard on that New England offense. And defensively for New England, I'm like, they have an okay pass rush, but their secondary isn't all that great. I think that if CJ Stroud has another game like he had last game where he's fumbling the football all over the place, again, I think that was partially on Pittsburgh for making some of those plays happen. But again, there was a few drops from the center QB exchange when it comes to the snap that has gone wrong, and I just think that if he does more of that, I think it's over at that point. But I think there's no way CJ has 2 bad games in a row like that, and I think that even without Nico Collins, I do think they have enough weapons offensively to go ahead and get the job done and make some plays that will put the Patriots on their toes defensively. Is the Patriots going to have their... Are they going to have Christian Gonzalez back? Because I do think that will be a big factor in this. Because Nico Collins is out. Let's see. Christian Gonzalez. Let's see here. Hold on. Gotta go all the way down here because, of course, I can't just look at it by team. That's the Jets. Let's see here. Christian Gonzalez. He's not on the injury report as of right now, so he will play. So they will have Christian Gonzalez. So I think they'll probably put him on the wide receiver from the one from Iowa State. Hold on, man. I'm picking a bad time to start forgetting names, and it also doesn't help that I'm sitting here by myself, so now it's just like quiet air time trying to figure out what the guy's name is. It's Jaden Higgins. I think, Christian Gonzalez will be all over Jaden Higgins all game. But I do think with them having the big game from Christian Kirk, it'll also be a big deal for that Houston team. If he can come out and make some bigger plays like he did I think he had like 144 yards last game. It's probably going to be a little bit too much to ask of him. But with him, Jalen Noel, if Jaden Higgins can make a few plays here or there, and I get it, he's going to have a hard job with working with Christian Gonzalez. Xavier Hutchinson, Barrios, and then they do run the football relatively well. But it's going to be all on that offensive line to kind of help protect CJ. Because, again, if he feels nervous because the offensive line is not protecting him or if there's bad snaps coming his way, I think it's going to be all over. But I do think New England defensively, they just don't have... Again, they have the one lockdown corner, and they have a relatively good front seven, but it's not nearly as good as what the Chargers have. Or actually more, not even close to what Pittsburgh has. So I'm not sure if they're going to be able to put as much pressure up on Houston. But again, with that offensive line for Houston, I think it's going to be, I wouldn't be totally surprised. But I'll take Houston, man. I'm going to take Houston to win this game. Here's my thing. I think that I don't think the weather's going to be that as bothersome for Houston as everybody thinks it might be. I think that CJ's been dealing with the weather for a long time. He's played in Columbus, Ohio in the bad weather, so I think he'll be more than used to it. I think CJ will be working to play a lot better than what he played last week. I think he's not going to put up 2 bad games in a row in that way. And then I think that between the teams, which offense has a better chance of performing against the defense they have to face in this game. I think it's going to be a lot harder for New England to produce against this Houston defense than it will be for Houston to produce against that Patriots defense. And again, like I said, if Houston's offensive line breaks down and like just lets New England through, then I think I'm screwed anyway. But I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take a chance. I'm gonna take Houston to win this game because I think their defense is absolutely atrocious. Not atrocious. They are ferocious and they're elite and they do a lot of good things. They tackle well. They know what they're doing. They get after the quarterback. And I think that if Drake May, there is a more than a good chance of Drake May throwing a few picks or having some fumbles that'll help out the Houston offense to be able to have some shorter field. So I'll take Houston to win that game. Next and last game, we have the number 5 LA Rams going, 5-seeded Rams going to the number 2 seeded Chicago Bears and playing in Chicago. Like I said before, this game is going to be incredibly cold. I think they said the real feel is going to be around 15 degrees, 10, 15 degrees with the not real feel. That's going to be what the actual temperature. And that because of the lake and all of that and the wind and everything going on around that, I think they call it lake effect. The real feel is actually going to be like in like -10. So I think that it is going to be cold enough to where I think both teams are going to be feeling the effects of this game in general. And again, I just don't think Chicago's going to have a huge advantage over the Rams when it comes to, because of how cold it is, it's going to affect everybody. So coming into this game on the Chicago side, their defense is not going to have a chance to stop LA. I really don't. If the LA Rams get their offense moving and getting down the field, I think when it comes to whether they decide to run the football, whether they decide to throw with Matthew Stafford to their wide receivers and Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, other than getting some interceptions, which I think Matthew Stafford has been throwing a few as of recently, other than that, the Chicago Bears defense has not been putting up a fight for the most part against any offense that they have faced. So I don't have a lot of hope for that defense to stop the LA Rams at all if they come and have a relatively good game. The offense for Chicago, can they have a little bit faster of a start? Again, the weather's going to impact everybody, so I'm not going to sit here and say that either offense is going to come out and they have a better chance of like starting off hot and like really doing some things early on in the game. But I think that there's no way that Chicago is going to be able to mosey around offensively for 3 quarters and then expect to be able to come back late in the fourth like they have been over pretty much this whole season. I just don't think there's going to be any chance that the Rams are just going to let Chicago do nothing offensively for 3 quarters and not have a good lead. On top of that, I just don't think the Rams are going to be able to, like, if they start this game and they kind of get a lead, I just don't think the Rams are going to totally hand the game over to Chicago in the same way that some of the teams that they have faced have. And then if it comes to a point where like whatever team has the ball last ends up winning it, I think I'd believe in the Rams a little bit more than I would believe in the Chicago Bears because, Matthew Stafford's done it so many times before. So can the Chicago Bears offense play a little bit better from the get-go and like just have a little bit more of a full football game rather than just waiting until the second half or waiting until the fourth quarter to kind of get things going with Caleb Williams, I think will be a big question that they'll have to answer. And here's my answer to that. I said, I don't think so, because here's my thing. They've been doing this all year long. That is not something that you just turn off one day and just say, hey, we're just going to be a better starting offensive team now that we're in the divisional round of the playoffs. Like you've been what you've been all year long. And I just think that if they kind of leave that door open for the Rams to kind of get a lead and then kind of build upon it, I just don't think the Rams are going to give it up like the Packers did last week. And on the Packers side, on the Rams side, Matthew Stafford, I know what he is. He had a little bit of a pick, a little bit turned the football over a little bit last week. I don't think he could do that, but I just think he does so much of doing everything else. He still throws the football so well. They get the football down the field. Again, it's going to be cold. It's going to be impacting everybody, but I think that they've dealt with it before. Heck, they played in it last year against Philadelphia and almost got the win there against a much better defense than what they're going to have to face with the Chicago Bears on Sunday night. So I think Matthew Stafford will be good for this game. I have a lot of confidence that he'll be able to come out and do what he has to do, even in the cold weather. And even if it comes down to being whoever has the ball last, if Matthew Stafford is that guy, I think he'll get the job done. And not to mention, I think he will be throwing to a good host of pass catchers, man. They'll have Puka Nacua, who is one of the most productive receivers he is the most, not the most productive receiver, because I think him and JSN have been battling for it all year long. But Puka Nacua is like that dude. He's like been so good, especially in the playoffs. He's been really good so far. He had a very good game against Carolina last week. So I think Puka Nacua will be awesome. He'll be ready to go. And I think him and Devontae Adams will be able to cook whoever they have on the other side of them. And I think, especially with Sean McVay being the head coach, kind of like making, like, cooking up some openings for their wide receiver to get the ball and have a chance to run with it, I think Sean McVay will get them in a good spot to be able to get that job done. Their running backs and Kyron Williams and why am I forgetting the running back's name? It's the guy from Michigan. I hate to. It's gross that I said that out loud. Why am I forgetting his name? Death chart. It's Blake Corum. That running back duo is very, very good. They're not going to be crazy explosive, but I think all in all, if they just keep handing the football off to them, I think they'll be able to get chunk after chunk after chunk of yards against this very bad Bears defense. So I do think that's going to be something they can do to kind of like keep their offense moving. I think whatever they choose to do, I think they're going to be good at, and I think that the Bears are not really going to be able to stop them at all offensively. So I think the passing game will be good. I think the running game will be good. I just think if they have a good mixture of both, I think they'll be fine in this game, and they will not fall into having the lulls that they had last week against Carolina, where it almost felt like they could have ran the football a lot more and controlled the game more, but they decided to keep throwing the football, and it kind of let Carolina get back into the game and kind of like stay in it. While it just felt like they could have ran the football a little more consistently, and they were getting chunk yards when they were running it. So they could have controlled the game a little bit more. I just think that whatever they decide to do, as long as they are consistent and keep the offense moving, I don't think there's anything the Bears can do to really stop them. And that's why I will take the LA Rams to win this game, man. And I think defensively, whenever Caleb decides to turn it on, whether it's in the first quarter or in the fourth quarter, more likely going to be in the fourth quarter, the second half, it's going to be very hard to stop Caleb Williams' that offense, because that's been their bread and butter all year long. It's Caleb throwing that football. Again, he's not very efficient, but he's gonna push the football down the field. One thing that is in his favor, he does not throw a lot of picks. He has been really good at not doing that. And I think Ben Johnson, as the OC for them, has really kind of like manufactured like some bigger plays for them to hit. And on top of that, has coached him up to not take a lot of sacks and to not throw a lot of picks and all of that. And I think that will keep that lack of negative yardage plays for that offense will kind of keep them in it, especially if they're not really scoring. But the thing is, that if the Rams defense can survive, can keep things moving, and not give up any stupid plays while the Bears are kind of struggling offensively, do not give them any reason to kind of spark their offense if they're not going to do it themselves. I think that's the question. That's what I'm looking for. Don't give them a big play they weren't necessarily looking for, and then it help spark the offense for the Bears when they probably weren't going to anyway, because the Bears have just been struggling all year long offensively to get going for the most part in these games. So if the Rams can play well enough, again, their secondary is their biggest issue, and I think the Bears will be able to take advantage of that if they decide to turn their offense on. But it's just stop the run, because when they're not doing great offensively, they do like to run the football a lot with Kyle Monungai and DeAndre Swift. So if you can stop the run, make Caleb have to get the job done, but he's very inefficient, and just keep the big play from going over your head, I think the LA Rams should probably win this game. They should. They're the better team. I think Matthew Stafford's been playing great football, and I think that Chicago has been playing around with having slow starts all year long. And I just don't think they're going to turn it on for this game when it's going to be the coldest that a playoff game has been in a very long time. And I think that the Rams are going to be able to handle the cold enough to get the job done and win this game. So that's all the games. There's only 4 of them. I don't know how I managed to turn this podcast into an hour and 43. I said this podcast was supposed to be short, and then I went and did it again. I don't know, man. I just like podcasting, and I don't know. I just like talking, especially about sports, man. I'll talk all day long. But yeah, that's about it, man. I don't want to have this podcast go any longer because I've been doing. Man, I'm so mad at myself. I made this as long as it was. I really was thinking like an hour 15, an hour and a half at tops, and then I went and did it for an hour 45. All right. Let's go ahead and get this over with. I don't want to make this go any longer than it has to. So, when the podcast here. If you're listening for a while, we appreciate you. If you're just now joining on, hopefully you like us and enjoy us enough to join us on this ride of talking about sports in the dumbest way possible. If this is the first podcast you listen to and you've listened to it all the way through, I appreciate you. If you just heard it and heard it was just me and you've been listening for a while, I appreciate it if you just listened to a little bit and pieced it up or anything like that. But if you're just now listening for the first time, if you can go listen to a different podcast that has both me and Jace on to get a better idea of what we are at our best when we're both here as podcast co-hosts and brothers, sitting here and making jokes, talking sports, doing it in the dumbest way possible. I would appreciate if you could go listen to one of those, kind of get a better idea of what we are at our best. And if you do like us and enjoy us, we'd appreciate if you could like our podcast, subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast 5 stars wherever you listen to us. We're pretty much available on all audio platforms out there, so we'd appreciate if you can do those things wherever you do find us and listen to us at. Also, share us with friends, family, enemies, anybody you feel like could enjoy the podcast we put out on a weekly basis. With it being 1 time a week, with it being 2 times a week during football season, and then 1 time a week for the rest of the year. We'd love if you could do that. And then, last but not least, if you could follow us on Twitter and/or X, whatever you'd like to call it. At JB Sports Pod is the podcast handle. At Javante Boozer is my handle, and then at Jace Boozer1 is Jace's handle. So, without further ado, have a great day. Have a great day. Have a great night. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for always listening. And we will see you guys next week. Bye, y'all.